What would you tell people who's struggling with writing? How to like writing, or how to get into it? How to overcome writer's blocks?
Well, I would probably not finish this video because I'm not a great example of it, but I would say that, kind of building off of what Michelle was saying, that you have to have some kind of interest in what you're doing. In terms of maybe like a general improvement of your vocabulary and your skill, I would also reiterate that you should definitely read a lot. I mean, I know a lot of people go on and on about how they hate reading and they don't, and I know sometimes it is a time issue as you grow and have more burden, as you have a part-time job and you have to go to classes and you have to read a zillion pages for each class. You really kind of lose any kind of passion you might have had, and so I guess what I recommend for that is just trying to find something that you can honestly sit down and enjoy. And it doesn't, like Michelle was saying, it doesn't have to be Nietzsche, it doesn't have to be that deep. It just needs to be something that you can work through and maybe even kind of shut your mind off of it. Like, you're still going to be passively learning things. You're going to improve your vocabulary, and you're gonna get a better sense for how to compose sentences without necessarily knowing the basics of grammar, because I never really understood grammar as a kid. I think the only reason I can write is because I read a lot. I also got an escape in books, and it allowed me to definitely have a lot of experiences and encourage my imagination. And I think I kind of passively picked up how to write things correctly. And to me, I don't know that's correct. I just know that it's kind of a feeling thing more than anything, and I don't really think too much about it. So I guess that's problematic depending on who you read, but it's served me fairly well.
What kind of books did you enjoy reading growing up?
Like, for really easily named things, I read like the whole Animorphs series. I read a lot of Goosebumps.
What are these series?
They're a couple children's series.
Mm-hmm.
Goosebumps obviously was done by R.L. Stine, and was a lot of it was geared towards kids and young adults, and just usually dealt with, I don't know, they're crudely labeled horror, but I don't know, they dealt with a lot of different things in life, and they were definitely interesting reads, and they weren't too difficult to get through. And then the other series was Animorphs, which was I always enjoyed. Again, not very difficult books to get through, but very inventive, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, other than that, I don't know. I don't really pay attention to a lot of the authors that I read. Like, I can cite, I read a lot of Crichton's work, Michael Crichton, who sadly passed. And
what do you think is the best work by Michael Crichton?
Michael Crichton, honestly,
don't tell me The Rising Sun.
Well, I can give you an obvious one. That is good. It's a very good book by him. But and honestly, I love a lot of the ones that were kind of bastardized by Hollywood, which is really weird, because usually I get really offended by what Hollywood does to a lot of novels, and not necessarily like in a, I don't know, not to kind of be pompous about it or highfalutin and always support that idea that the book is better than the movie, but it typically is. And even to be hypocritical, one of the first movies that I loved was Jurassic Park, which was actually kind of how I got into Crichton, because I watched that when I was way too young and loved dinosaurs like most kids, and that was a really powerful, like, I guess, intro into dinosaurs. And then I actually read the original novel, which was completely different, and I read the sequel they wrote, Lost World, which is also completely different from the movie adaptation. And actually a big reason that I read a lot of his earlier work was because of my step grandfather, which is kind of a weird thing to say. He reads a ton of work, and a lot of it is historical fiction, but he also really likes Crichton. So he had a lot of first editions of like Sphere and The Congo and 13th Warrior and a lot of classic Crichton books. But as for my favorite, it was probably a more recent one of his that he wrote called State of Fear, which is really good because it touched on a lot of current issues. It talked about everything from global warming to what else? I don't know, just a lot of different things. It just kind of dealt with perception as a whole, and it kind of what Michelle was talking about with a couple historical series that she really likes, historical fiction, the author providing a lot of citation and giving you a lot of information to fill in what you may not know. He did the same thing with his book because it was very much a commentary on our current world, but he wasn't necessarily for or against a lot of the elements that were represented. He took a very interesting perspective on it. He kind of he was definitely in the book, like you had his personality, but he tried to present all sides of the issues he brought up. And he actually had a really interesting author's note in the back where he talked about that, and he encouraged people to look up sources that he cited and to think about these issues for themselves and not to just listen to him, because as he put it, everybody's biased, and everybody has a biased or has a biased perspective except for him, which was kind of a joke, but it was a good book.
So you do like citations?
to a degree, yeah. Like I didn't pay attention much to all of his citations, but it was nice to have that backup. It was nice to have the ability to look at, to follow his trail, I guess, to follow what prompted him to do it. But the thing was, his citations, probably also like the series that Michelle likes, that's not what his book was built on. It wasn't strung together on these quotations and on these citations. It was just there to allow the reader, if they so chose, to follow his breadcrumbs and make up their own mind about the scientific data that he cited and the articles he cited, the books that he read, the historians that he cited. So it was definitely an integral part of the book, but it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't a scapegoat, it wasn't a crutch for him.
What do you think about academic citation that you have to do for a lot of classes?
I don't really enjoy it, and it's definitely one part laziness and two parts indignant.
Tell me about the indignation.
It's what I was talking about with Michelle. I have issues with this concept of common knowledge and what you have to cite. Like I do understand it from the standpoint of kind of letting people gauge your authenticity, I guess, and like how well read you are. But there's got to be you involved in it. It's like you can't lie to people about the fact that you're writing this paper. It's going to be your perspective. It's shaded by you. No matter, even people that use citation after citation, quote after quote, that's manipulated. That's taken out of the original context. They can make any of these floating words support what they want it to. And unless you actually go and look at that book, which, a lot of people are lazy, you really don't know what the original author's intent was in writing that. And even then, you only know what they tell you in that book, and you only know what you assume. I mean, you haven't met the person, you haven't really talked with them. But I guess that's getting into more theoretical stuff, I guess.